Imagine arriving at a place where everything is built, but no one is there. That's what the Mexica encountered when they reached the Valley of Mexico in the 14th century. A massive city, precise, silent. Welcome to Obsidaria, history as it's rarely told. The streets were intact, the pyramids still stood, but there were no people. And to be absolutely clear, the Mexica did not build that city. They arrived centuries later when it was already abandoned. Those who raised it and kept it alive were the people we now call the Teotihuacanos, those who lived there when the city was still active. To understand why that place exists, we have to go much further back, to a time before there was any city at all. At that same point in the valley, the same thing happened every time. First, the air changed. The wind picked up, dust rose, branches shifted, and the wind held its direction. It wasn't a breeze. It was the beginning of the cycle. At times, the sky cleared completely and the night became sharp and readable. And the elders, those who witnessed it closely, described it this way. Quetzalcoatl was there. He didn't walk the way we do. He didn't remain still. He was movement itself. A long body covered in rigid feathers, layered like armor. He passed, and the sky was left ready to be read. In that early stage, there were no murals and no records. Only signs remained. The rain didn't fall, it slammed down. That's when Tlaloc descended. Rivers awakened, channels filled. The land drank deeply. The Teotihuacanos always repeated the same words. When he descends, the valley lives, and if he stays too long, the valley trembles. That's why the descent was brief. For generations, that was the limit. Without a structure to contain it, Tlaloc could not remain. The cycle closed. The conclusion became inevitable. That place was not meant for a village. It was meant for something far greater. Around 100 BCE, construction began at Teotihuacan. It was built with an obsession for order. Alignments, proportions, platforms, pyramids. It wasn't a whim. It was engineering made stone. The city was designed like a body, built to resist, contain, and sustain what descended from above. The wind returned with precision. The sky opened, and Tlaloc descended. But this time, the city held. Storms were no longer brief impacts. They became stable, living rivers, working channels, fertile land. Teotihuacan grew because the valley responded. And with stability came something that had once been impossible. Time to observe the sky again and again. Time to measure. Time to adjust. Stars stopped being just lights. They became patterns, and patterns became calendars. Knowledge expanded. Astronomy, timekeeping, calculation, proportion, order. They also learned how to care for themselves better. Plants, remedies, hygiene, recovery. With the cycle stabilized, records appeared. Murals, reliefs, ceramics, once observation became possible. And the way they depicted them sends chills down the spine. Tlaloc with circular eyes, fangs, streams flowing from his face. Quetzalcoatl as pure motion, covered in structured feathers. And once the system was running, the pact emerged. Not a pact of words, a pact of precision. Exact rituals, fixed timings, constant offerings. As long as that balance held, the cycle continued. Teotihuacan grew vast. More people, more strain, more ambition. And cracks began to form.
Rituals delayed, dates shifted, offerings reduced. At first, they seemed insignificant, until the sky began to respond differently. Winds that started and died halfway, nights that never fully cleared, storms that lingered too long, rivers rising and falling as if the valley were breathing incorrectly. The system wasn't broken, it was warning. Around 550 CE, Tlaloc descended again.
If you want more stories you won't find in textbooks, like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
The city trembled. It was a warning, a correction attempt.
But the city no longer acted as one. It fractured internally. Some wanted to restore exact order. Others tried to force the system, because everything depended on it. And when a city depends entirely on something, it begins to make desperate choices. No answer came. Then Quetzalcoatl descended into the storm. The shift was immediate. The wind twisted violently, as if bending the air itself. It pushed upward into the clouds, split them apart. For seconds, the valley was trapped between two forces, Tlaloc holding the storm in place, rain pounding down, water rising through rivers and channels. Quetzalcoatl entering in spiraling wind, cutting through cloud, forcing the sky open. The storm tried to remain, the wind tried to break it, and Teotihuacan stood between them, bearing the load. Quetzalcoatl made the final choice, to end the cycle. The wind shifted instantly. Clouds scattered. The storm stopped as if a gate had been slammed shut. Tlaloc withdrew. And when Tlaloc withdrew like that, everyone understood. This wasn't a pause. It was an ending. The valley avoided total collapse. The cost was absolute. At first, many believed the cycle would return. They waited for clear skies. They waited for order. But days passed, and the pattern never came back. Then the slow unraveling began. Rains weakened, rivers shrank, channels dried in segments. Teotihuacan, built to sustain an active system, began to feel like a machine powered down. A city like that doesn't empty overnight. First, sectors closed. Then populations thinned. Then entire districts went dark. Between 550 and 650 CE, the people of Teotihuacan left. The city emptied the way a temple empties when it's understood the god is no longer present. Before leaving, they set the city into a sealed state. Spaces were closed, access points covered, zones secured. Not to hide ruins, but to make it clear this was no longer a place to live. That's why, centuries later, when the Mexica arrived, they found a city intact, yet empty. A place once activated, and then shut down. The Mexica arrived after silence had settled. The people of Teotihuacan lived the cycle while it still worked. And when the pact was broken, Quetzalcoatl chose to end the cycle. Tlaloc withdrew, and Teotihuacan stopped. As a warning, This story is a work of fiction, inspired by the mythology of Teotihuacan, and based on real historical sources, murals, records, chronicles, research, and documents. Written, designed, and created by LEP. You can also explore other major Obsidaria stories, including the Great Wall of China, Easter Island, Rapa Nui, and the Pyramids of Egypt, among many others.